Okay, now we got about 50 participants, so I think it's time to introduce Professor LIANG. Yeah, so I'm very pleased to introduce one of my friends as well as mentors that I look up to, Professor LIANG. So Professor LIANG is an assistant professor in the School of Journalism and Communication at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He is also a theme co-leader with me on social-spatial networks at the Computational Social Science Laboratory at CHK, and an affiliate member at the Web Mining Laboratory at the City University of Hong Kong. Professor Liang received his undergraduate degrees in Shanghai Jiaotong University and his PhD from City University of Hong Kong. He is a very prolific scholar. He has published more than 40 journal articles, many of which appear in the prominent communication journals, as well as public health, information science, sociology, and other interdisciplinary journals. So today, Professor Liang will talk about the structures and consequences of political discussions using online social media data. So please join me welcoming Professor Liang.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jimmy, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming for today's talk. So I'm going to share my slides. Okay. So I guess I have 1 hour for the talk, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
then we will have 30 minutes for discussion, right? So
yes.
Okay, so that would be good. So anyway, so but during my talk, if you have any questions, you can just interrupt me at any time. You can just also use the chat box to send your questions when you have any thoughts, just in case that you forget what I talked. Okay. So anyway, so I guess that we can get it started. So as I just mentioned, I'm Liang from Journalism School and Communication CHK. You can just call me Hi for short. So today's talk about I'll focus on political discussion, political talk, or conversation. Anyway, you can call it in any way. We'll just focus on two aspects of this of a political conversation. One is its structures, and the second is how the structures are related to the different political consequences. So it will be primarily will be just really not just related to communication, but also related to political science and sociology. And you will see a lot of theories and also methods used in other sibling disciplines as well. So before I formally introduce the findings, and as I outlined in the abstract, that I'm going to summarize a series, not just a single study, but several, if not many. Okay. So the findings, but before that, I just want to talk a little bit about some theoretical backgrounds and why we are interested in the political discussion or political conversation. So I guess that that is a hot topic, at least once a hot topic. I guess that is still a hot topic, right? So that is talking about the political discussions on social media platforms on the internet in particular. Okay, so that the theoretical background is that people are interested in. I actually has argued that is more than 100 years ago that I think that a political conversation, in particular about the formal political talk, that is the soul of democracy. So that I think that is a core part of the democratic society. So there are different theoretical traditions that we are studying the political discussions. One is from the deliberative literature. That is, I guess, that most of us study the Habermas public sphere that emphasizes rational critical discussion, not just online but offline. Okay, because this since that is proposed this many years ago, that is very important for deliberative democracy, that to help people to make consensus, the rational consensus. Okay, not just the manipulated consensus as many scholars, the leftists argue. Anyway, so under this framework that the scholars usually that will study how to evaluate that how deliberative that the political discussions in daily life. So the second line of research that is from political science to study political influence, that is the things that the people talk with interact with different people that may have different consequences. Is simply because this is we are embedded in a social network. So you talk to different people usually implies different social networks that also means that a different political influence. Okay. So like people that if we in the past that we generally would believe that people if you talk to diverse people, people with diverse backgrounds that generally that will be more rational, reasonable, okay, to accept the different ideas that are more express mutual understandings among the participants as well. So the last one that is from Putman's social capital, that is talk sometimes also means that social capitals that so to some degree that it's a good thing that for a whole society to build the community for civic engagement and political participation as well. So but all these studies that at the very beginning actually are talking about there's an ideal type of a political discussion that is relatively speaking that is in a formal form that is under the rational critical assumption. But when everything actually moves to online, in particular on social media platforms, that we sometimes call it that is to compare to the formal conversation that we call them informal political discussions on social media platforms that are actually changing a lot. Okay, so not just not mentioned to the structures, but also the consequences and everything else. So so there are different perspectives. I would see we cannot consider them as a series, but there are different perspectives. And always for new technologies that at the very beginning, we have the three kinds of perspectives. The one is cyber optimism. That said, that is basically under the deliberative democracy literature, the framework that to evaluate how deliberative the conversations, the political talk on social media platforms. So like they want to evaluate whether to what degree that the political discussion are reciprocal or not, whether they interact with different people with diverse backgrounds, whether the conversation are under the assumption of equality or not. So they basically think that this is a good opportunity for political discussion for the general public to express their opinions. So they celebrate that it is something good for the society, and it's for the deliberative democracy. But on the other side, that is a cyber pessimism that actually thinks, oh, this is not true. Then we can actually currently, okay, actually in the recent 5 years, that I guess that most of you have this feeling, okay, that is a lot of misinformation, instability, and polarization online, and even there's no equality at all, and we see a lot of inequalities so on the internet. So, but anyway, both that you always can find something in the positive side, and also at the same time you can find something negative. I don't think that it is it's a good way that we understand the social media or political conversation in this way. So naturally, there will be a third one that we call the cyber realism. That I guess that is we emphasize too much on the communication technologies like internet and social media. So in fact, actually, because I'm trained as a communication scholar, I can tell you a lot of story about the media studies in the last 100 years. So usually we think that. So for others, for the general public, that they think that the meter is so important that sometimes powerful, but actually it's no. After a lot of empirical studies, we just find some very limited impact on the society. So, but on the other, actually you reverse the relationship, then you will think that the media industry, or the media ecology, and even how people that use media, like viewing television and reading newspaper and even just posting on social media actually will be they're influenced by the society, okay, not just influence the society, but also influenced by the society. So like the political system and even the economic powers that could be easily influence the whole industry. So anyway, I'm gonna go to the detail, go into the details because today I will just focus on focus more on the methodology, just give you a sense of what's going on here, some theoretical background. So there are a lot of different aspects of political discussion, but what I'm going to focus on today is just on the structure. So, but it could be other things like the content and even the context. Sometimes the contexts are very important, as I just mentioned. So even the political talk in China actually is very different from the political in the United States. So I'm not going to talk about that, but just to focus on the structure. So the reason is the reason is that actually we usually in the past that we measure the conversation in a very simple way. So usually we just like in a survey to ask how frequently that you talk to others about politics, or like in that way, or how frequently that you post political issues or share political issues on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So, but actually it could be more, how to say, how you could be more complicated for the structure per se, the structure of the conversation per se, okay? So the structure could be very complicated, but we can understand it in a very easy way, okay? So it could be defined as a structure as rules, some rules, certain rules of organizing, okay? So that is organizational principles, okay? Rules or norms, so that how you organize the conversation. This is a dynamic view, which is in contrast to the static view like to later I will show you, maybe I can show you right now, okay? So this is one of the famous picture in computational social science, okay? So that is the different colors, the red and the blue, that actually indicates the liberal and conservative bloggers in the United States many years, nearly 20 years ago, come on. So anyway, that you will see, this is at that time, that is the most popular social media platform is a blog. Okay, so this is the data collected from blog. And then there were the links between the nodes, and nodes are different bloggers. Okay, so the color indicates a different ideology, the left and the right. So the links between them actually the hyperlink. So in the past, in the blog, so if you have any experience using blog, so there is an area that you can just post some links, okay, to your friends, okay. So if the readers read your blogs, then I also can click the links. So this is you will see that actually Neft is more likely to link to the Neft, okay, Neft bloggers, the right blog to the right. So and then you will see this what we call fragmentation, okay. So it's quite divided. So this is a kind of a structure for sure, but this is just a static way that we to view it. Okay, so we see that this is the status is something like this, but we don't know how that actually the network form and the reason, the underlying mechanism, okay, about that. So so we adopted this definition as a rules of organizing, that which naturally means that well, not just want to describe the characters of the networks, but also the underlying mechanisms. So in the network term, so the structure of the conversation actually is it can be measured as who replies to whom, or you can just definitely more general way as who interact with whom, okay, in a discussion network. So this is not just to guide you to examine something new aspects, but also it's a good way to summarize the existing studies in political discussion. So in this network, so you can calculate like the network heterogeneity or diversity. So the diversity could be measured with different attributes like the gender, race, social status and whatever else that you can just you can imagine. So in political communication, that actually this is a very hot area that is studied the so-called the cross-cutting discussions. That means that the consequences of how people, that if people talk to the ones with totally different ideas, opinions. So this is just like an ego network that you can calculate the frequency. So like I will talk to people about political issues every day, but it is like 80% of them I'm just talking to the people with similar ideas instead of the cross-cutting one. And so basically this structure is measured, what I just mentioned is measured the fragmentation instead of a polarization. So there are, at least for me, there are two totally different but related concepts. The polarization, which means that involving the opinions, attitudes, but the fragmentation is just the structure, which is not necessarily related to the opinions, but we indeed we find out, we have evidence to suggest that the fragmentation that indeed can increase polarization. So including one of the recent study by Professor Gemini. So last time he talked about this relevant study about that. So by in addition to this homophily mechanism, what we call the homophily, that is to just compare the similarity of the attributes. So so by in addition to that, actually we usually not in the field that we ignore that most of this is what I call endogenous mechanisms, because that if you consider the interaction patterns as the rules as the structure, the definition of the structure, and you can ignore this, that is a network that actually formed, not related to just the homophily, but some inherent, okay, endogenous mechanisms like popularity. So which means preferential attachment. So that means that people always want to talk to the one who are popular, okay, talk to the opinion leaders, okay. And a reciprocity. So if you reply to me, and probably more likely, at least more likely to reply to you, okay, as a courtesy or whatever. Transitivity, that your friends will more likely to be your friends. So there are many this kind of this purely structural patterns. But what even so, even this purely structural factors have you can find them that has been incorporated in the network analysis literature, but the conversation norms actually has been totally ignored. So like so since we are talking about a political conversation or discussion, so that is by definition that is kind of a conversation, right? So you must follow the conversation norm, even though we are talking in the public space, that maybe the norm maybe could be changed and whatever, but at least it is, right? So we actually this for linguistics, that there are a lot of literatures that are talking about this conversation norms. So the first study I introduced here is that we use the data from the United States US elections in 2020. Okay, 2020, that is 10 years ago. That from a United States discussion forum. Okay, at that time the discussion forum is still very popular, and the discussion forums are still active right now. So one of the major purposes that we want to incorporate the different rules I just mentioned, like the homophily and endogenous mechanisms in the study, to see how that is a network, the discussion network, the structure, how it forms. So this is some descriptive statistics. So this is a very, I guess that many of you didn't see this kind of results. Okay, this is maybe the mainstream. You can always see this fragmented results, but as you can see that here, that actually no. Okay, so actually the people are more inclined to talk to the one with different ideology. Okay. So the cross ideology is even more popular than the within ideology talk. Okay, so this is in discussion forums. So later I will explain why. Okay, so this is just some anecdotal post hoc explanations, but there are many studies that are using forums, using the web forums as a to connect data from the forums. That you can find this kind of studies, not just me. But this is quite different from the data from Twitter or even from the blogs I listed here. So in order to incorporate the different mechanisms, as I just mentioned, the ideology is just the attribute, one of the many attributes that to measure the homophily. So as you can see, indeed, that is actually the cross versus within, that is cross, which means that the different ideologies that people are more likely to talk with each other. So this is I would just briefly introduce the model that we used to model, because the conversation is just like a static network. And you could be repeated ages. So if I reply to Jamie and Jamie will reply me back and I can reply back to you. So that will be different terms. So we consider that as a string, okay, a string of relational events. So this model is formally called relational event models. So the relation is that like A reply to B, this is a relation. So, and then we also need to consider the time. So like a survival analysis, that at each time that there is a likelihood of whether the relation will happen. And if the relation will happen, and then we can decide which relation, A reply to B or B reply to C. So in this way, then we can incorporate like the popularity and other endogenous mechanisms as well, and also the conversation norms. So you will see this is just I don't have time to explain what the conversation norms that I included in the study, but anyway, there are many. Okay, so it's quite flexible that you can incorporate more. So the core idea here is that if you incorporate the conversation norms and the control for other endogenous mechanisms, that actually you can see that it will definitely influence the estimation of the homophily effect, like the ideology that was simply. So which means that the conversation norms and other endogenous mechanisms actually can influence how likely people that talk to people with different or similar ideologies, right? So what do you see here? So what you measure in a static way, maybe it's inaccurate. It does not mean that people are more inclined to talk to people with what. Maybe this is just a byproduct of other mechanisms as well.
Oh,
so we actually we did this study further, okay, to study the consequence of this kind of a cross ideological political discussion in the discussion forums. So this is still very strange, okay, way of modeling. But anyway, so we just consider the dependent variable here is the common ground instead of a consensus that people may, I guess that many scholars are more interested in how whether the political discussion can produce consensus. So the common ground actually is something different from consensus, because the consensus basically means that sharing similar opinion attitudes, but the common ground just means we are talking about the same thing. So the common ground actually is the step one for consensus. So if you have no common ground and no consensus. So some theories that are argued that maybe probably that a political discussions is very hard to produce the consensus, but we can produce the common ground. And also the common ground is I actually want to call for in the deliberative democracy. So we just want to test this hypothesis. This actually is a pair of hypotheses in the network. Okay, so why is that? Whether the discussion, whether sharing common ground that can lead to discussion, that means we have a lot of things to talk about, so we talk. So another hypothesis actually is how likely that is that if we talk that we can share some common ground. Okay, so this is a pair of hypotheses. So just intertwine. So our modeling strategy is here like this. So first, about the political discussion, as I just mentioned, we're just modeling using as a discussion network. Next, there are two individuals, I and J, so I can reply to J or J can reply to I or whatever. So, but at the same time, we created another bipartisan network. So that bipartisan network is that an association between the individuals with a different common ground. So how to make, what is the common ground? Okay, so the common ground is that we measure using a semantic network. Think about it in that way. So we guess that people that are using similar terms, not just the similar terms in the discussion or similar topics, but also the relations, okay, the connections between the terms. So like when you're talking about the Obama or Trump, okay, so I guess that you have different ways to talk. We can talk about Obama related to the economic policies or the political policies. They're quite different. So if you related, you can just use a semantic network to pull out that, okay, like related Trump to immigration and Obama to economic policy and whatever. So this means that they are different. So even they are talking about the election, okay? So anyway, so we can just decompose this common ground as if two persons or two individuals that you share a common framework or semantic network, which means that they interpret the same issue in the same way, okay? Okay, so and then this is just a bipartisan network. We share a lot of similarity, and we guess that they are same. So the bipartisan network actually here is that we mirrored as in the semantic network that will be decomposed as a list of age lists. Okay, a list of ages. So the ages are the word associations. So anyway, I will talk about it later because that at that time I conducted a study in 2012. So there is nothing about there is no such thing like the word embeddings and whatever. But actually now currently, if I reconduct the study, you can just improve this model easily. Anyway, but the general idea is like this. So this I that is related to a word association, that means the one interpretation that interpret related Donald Trump with immigration and whatever, this kind of a lot of pairs of words. So the hypothesis will be tested in this way, that if I talk to J and I is associated with this interpreting framework, and I will just whether J will adopt that interpretation later. Okay. So, but the other one, that is if I and J, that actually the talking have the similar interpretation framework, whether they will talk, reply to each other later. Okay. So, and then this is the model, as you can see, that is like just a panel model that we have different waves. So indeed, the same frame, okay, that actually indeed that can increase the likelihood of discussion, that people are more likely to talk to each other. As you can see, I also included ideology here as a control variable, and you can see that is negative. That means people are actually more likely to talk to the people with different ideologies. Okay, maybe this is was a good old days. Okay, we all experienced that 10 years ago. I guess that right now, even I collect the data from the same platform, then maybe I cannot get this kind of results. So also here you can see the discussion that the parameters, the coefficient is positive, that which means that indeed that it can increase the discussion between the users that will help to produce the common ground. So as I just mentioned, so why one of the reasons that is the time that is good old days that people still believe a conversation that can produce something good. Okay, unlike what recently happened, okay, on other social media platforms. This could be one reason, but there could be other reasons, that because the discussion forum actually is designed in totally different way compared to other social media platforms, including Facebook and Twitter, Instagram. So one of the major differences is that the discussion forum actually were organized by issues. So you submit like reddit.com, you still can find it. So you submit a topic and people just reply the topic and not reply to a person or a user. So in other words, that actually there's no following relationships. There's no following functions on the discussion forums. But think about that for Facebook and Twitter, actually it's organized in a totally different way. That is organized that the individual users is a unit. Okay, so we can follow each other and then we share the information among us. So this was totally different. So the Twitter and the social and Facebook actually emphasize more on the individuals and the individual connections, which is definitely that I guess that people are more likely to follow that people with similar from the same ideology group. So you can imagine that naturally they will get more information from the same ideology groups, right? So this is quite different from the discussion forums. So as I just mentioned, okay, so the social media platforms, the recent social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, that is one of the major new function, and important function that is actually the following. So if you have asked me to name one of the most important invention of social media, that actually is the following. Okay, before Twitter and Facebook, we don't even know that I don't know why that people don't have that kind of things, that we have RSS feeds, but we don't, even in the blog. So we have the link functions, but we don't even have a following function. Okay. So anyway, the following function actually changes the whole ecosystem, the media system, and even the people, how people talk to each other. So that is one of the important things, that when we have the following relation on the social media platforms, that naturally means that we have a explicit network, social networks, the following networks. So that is true, not implicit. Okay, that is a real network on social media platform, has full functions. So one of the major functions is that for information diffusion. So if I retweet or post something, that you could be spread through the following networks. Okay, so naturally, when we're talking about the discussions, political conversations, that we want to also know that how that the information also spread in this network. So there are different structures of this kind of diffusion patterns. So one is what we call broadcast diffusion, that is one to many. Okay, so like television or the mass media, newspaper, that is generally the one to many. But now that it becomes this kind of this is a feasible but viral diffusion, viral spreading, that is from one to several others, and as the intermediaries, and then pass to others. So there are totally different structures. But I can tell you that this is our initial impression. I guess that social media on social media platforms, the information usually spread in this way, that with many multiple depths. But actually, this is still dominant even on Twitter. The broadcast diffusion pattern is still dominant. Many, even you see some very popular tweets, okay, with millions of retweets. I can tell you that it's simply because that they have a lot of followers, and most of them, I guess 90% of them actually of the retweets actually are retweeted directly from the city user, not through this way. Okay. So this is the reality. Okay. So, but anyway, so what we did in addition to that, actually, we also want to know whether this kind of diffusion structure that actually can be beneficial for political communication. So we did this. We calculated at each cascade depth. So at each step, we just calculated how many tweets, how many retweets actually are from different, okay, from different ideological groups. So this, and then so at each step we can calculate the value, calculate the probability of cross ideological sharing. Okay, so and you can see that actually increased over the cascade depths. That basically means that if as I just mentioned, the reality is that it's very unlikely. Okay, but if the information or tweet is spread, deeper, and it's more likely that it will be received by people with different ideologies or different political attitudes, opinions. This is a lot of cost by the time. As you can see, as time goes by, that actually the cross ideological sharing actually decreased. Okay, so they are different. So, okay, this is back to, I guess I'm talking too much about the United States, about the discussion forums and also Twitter. So back to the discussion forums in Hong Kong. So as I just mentioned, it's very, at least for me, that is a very interesting design, even it's not so popular right now worldwide, but it's once it's very popular even in China, that like Tianya Luntang. So that is once the most important social media for public expressions in China. So anyway, so there's just another kind of structures which are also related to what I just mentioned about the reciprocity. So for the normative theories that I usually believe that the equality, okay, that is one of the criteria that to evaluate the deliberativeness. But as later you can see that actually the inequality sometimes could be considered as a good thing, and even it's not avoidable. Okay, so I will put this context in the social movement in 2000, several years ago, 3 years ago now, that 2019 anyway. So I guess that most of you in Hong Kong that have heard of this term, that is leaderless structures. So people claims that the movement in 2019, that is so-called leaderless movements, because actually, according to the definition from the social media, social movement studies, that is true, because it's clearly defined as absence of professional leaders. So if no one person, okay, one leader claims I'm the leader and all agree, so there's no leader, and no formal leadership structures or organizations. Okay, so indeed there's no formal leadership structures or organizations, or people group steering or protest the movement who is huge, very, very, very influential. So this is a formal definition, but the problem is that when we move to online, so I use the LIHKG data. So here we connected all this kind of data during the movement. So there's one very important thing. So even we cannot see this formal leadership. So there are a lot of there are many opportunities that you can find out some what is so-called informal leaders. So in particular on the discussion forums, that can you imagine that all people on the platform that could be express their ideas equally and with equal influence? It's impossible, right? It's impossible. So if you want to find a leader, you can always find a leader. So why? Because this is simply because of the power law. Okay, it's something universal. So like if you measure the influence as like how many how many replies you will receive, or how many likes that you will receive, according to the preferential attachment, indeed that you will find one that with most likes, most of the replies. So it's unavoidable, okay, because that is the distribution of the influence is certainly, okay, universally that are unequal distributed. So if we really want to know how, to what extent that is the discussions about the social movement, that is leaderless, that we need to use in some other ways, like the measure which we proposed here, that is about the instability. Okay, so that is the leadership structure is not fixed. That is a real idea. So it's not fixed. We don't have a, so if I think, okay, somehow that I posted something and I got a lot of replies and a huge influential in this week, but for the next week, probably I'm not. If you can always post something influential, and this is a stable leadership structure, it's equivalent to the formal leadership, okay? So otherwise, then we will see, even we have leaders, but we don't have, but it's distributed, open, okay? So sometimes in management science, we call it distributed leadership. So this is about some findings that you can see that I use the Gini inequality the Gini coefficient to measure the inequality, but for sure you can just plot out the distribution in terms of the replies received by the different users on the platform, and calculate to estimate the probable exponent. But anyway, you can just use a simple way, and you will see the Gini coefficient that is very high, which indicates that it's very unequal. So this is for movement, and this is for non-movement discussions. So you will see that I actually had similar at a similar level. So no difference. So it's nothing to do with what topic is that you're talking. But what's really interesting when we're talking about the instability, okay, as I just mentioned. So in each week, we can estimate the rank of the users according to the number of replies they received. So for each week, over time, that you can calculate the different values and you can calculate the variance. So you will show, and this is a natural measure of the instability. You will see that it's a movement that is more unstable than non-movement discussions. Okay, and this is another way that to calculate the instability. Okay, so in general, our finding actually that indeed, so the movement discussions is more diffused or distributed, the leadership. So so if you think that, okay, this is something about the leaders consequence of the leaderness. So if you think that there's no leader and no stable leadership, then how that people can organize, okay? So when we're talking about organized, actually it means different thing. So what is organized, like in a social movement or even in a discussion? So this is related to that old concept, old term, that in the past that we're talking about, when we're talking about something online that is, so okay, this is off topic. So the opposite of off topic is that the focus, the topic, right? So the focus, and we will see that the discussion is organized. So even more focus, that will be more organized, right? So what is the focus? The focus then, which means that is inequality, okay? So like there are different topics here. I will focus on one instead of equally assign your attention. That is focused, okay? So this is actually inequality. So we use the, again, we use the Gini coefficient to calculate the degree of the focus, okay, of the organization degree for the movement and non-movement discussions. And then the X here, that is the number of users, and you will see once the users increased, hey, you will see that the inequality actually increased, but not the case in the non-movement discussions. So this is just to cross-validate our measurement to see that why we can use that, because then if there are more people, that if indeed the focus, they are competing for the attention, so the more people usually means more competition and so more unequal. Okay, so I also run a formal regression model between the movement and using the movement and non-movement discussions. So there are some very, at least for me, that are interesting findings here. So you will see that what types of topics will attract more attention in the discussion forums. So they are quite different between the movement discussion and non-movement discussions. So, but one of the very important factors is what we call communication activity. So if you are more active, so you are more likely to post something will be received a lot of replies as well. But you will see that this the effect size in the non-movement discussion is much larger than in the movement discussion. Okay, so they're quite different. But it's basically indicates that actually even this important factors in movement discussions has been changed. So what's really important in the movement discussions and unique. So that is what we call the mechanism of attention competition. So during the movement, there are a lot of posts, okay, a lot of threads that submit, I guess that several hundred every minute. So you can imagine that. So which one that it will be popular, okay? So that will largely influenced by this attention competition mechanisms. So the coordinates, which means that during that time window, that how many other tweets, competing tweets that are posted, not tweets, series, threads posted. And the response time is how likely is the first, how soon that is the first reply posted. Okay, you will see, anyway, I don't care about the coefficients. The important thing is that is the difference between the movement and non-movement discussions of the effect size. So you will see that it's largely compared to the non-movement discussions, those effect size in the movement discussions is very large. So which means that this is a very important mechanism to organize the attention competitions, to organize the nearness discussions. Anyway, so yeah, I still have 10 minutes, right? So that's good. So this is the last study, okay? This is some study. This is a study not still work. This is a work study, okay? So since I guess I'm talking too much about structure, I guess that is, to be fair, as a media scholar or communication scholar, I need talking something about the content and also something about the negative side of the conversation. So oh, this is a very, very controversial, I know that. And this is not my original idea. So when I was a student, I asked a professor, economics professor, I asked him, what is agency compared to structure? So he told me, for me, that agency is a residual of structure, okay? So I just bothered that sentence here to see that the content is a residual of structure, and I don't think I'm not intention to argue that the content is totally not important, but as I just mentioned at the very beginning, as a communication scholar, that actually we study the communication content intensively in the last 100 years. But I can tell you a lot of story, and finally that actually we probably that what we found is just some residual. Like what is popular content that we studied in communication studies, like the media violence, and we even have a theory about that. Is called cultivation theory. Okay, the media cultivation. So and pornography and many others, like recently on the social media platform, like flaming, misinformation, disinformation, and off topic, and more recently about the incivility that people are using some. Like using the phone language, name calling, and whatever. So I can tell you that the most classical one is that people in communication studies to study the media violence, usually, as you can still imagine that people think that the media violence and pornography that will influence people in a negative way. So if you are exposed to a lot of media violent content on the television, that you're more likely to perceive the word as more unsafe. Okay, you can see a lot of this kind of thing, even for the misinformation and fake news debate today, that like the politicians, I guess that I use the term correctly. Most of the politicians think that the fake news that it's a damage of the society, think that is will influence the whole society and individuals in negative ways. But actually, as you can see, that for most, I see that for the fake news and misinformation studies, empirical studies, is using the rigor methodology that actually, at best, there's just some very limited effects. As David Lazar last time, I also mentioned this. And also for the media violence, as I mentioned, we studied this for many, many years. We cannot see that the violence is good, but we cannot see that it's powerful, okay? So you can, and people always think that the media violence that will influence others, but not me, okay? So I'm well educated. Definitely, I know what is real, what is wrong, okay, what is true. So this is, we also have a theory to explain that. This is what we call third person effect, that we always think that we're better than others. So, and this is a commonly well-known self-serving psychology, whatever. So just to let you know, so here, again, so we want to study the incivility, like, and it's also very popular. So why I'm interested in the incivility is simply, it's also because of this. Okay, so after 2014, and one professor in our school that told me that he heard a lot of vulgarity and name calling words that on campus. That so I think that is probably that is something interesting to explore. So anyway, so the incivility could be argued, actually not argued in the empirical studies in the NAB, okay? So usually we use NAB experiments to study this. And I think that indeed it has some positive side effects, like that it will catch your attention and can increase participation. But you can argue that participation is not good, okay? So anyway, so for the negative side is that actually if you use several words, that it will decrease the trust, and also for sure by definition that it will decrease the deliberativeness. That is a belief, and that is not good in the political discussion. But this is a major argument. There's no effect, so no effect actually. So I can use through a lot of meta-analysis recently published. Okay, actually it's more close to no effect. Okay, even you have some effect, that it's very limited. Okay, so it's not so serious at all. It's very unlike that what the general public expected. Okay, so but I want to emphasize one thing, that we're talking about the uncivil content, which is actually not equal to the uncivil perceptions. Okay, this is one of my recent study. I indeed did that. I finally found that even we define the uncivil words that clearly, like in Cantonese, that we know that it's definitely a swearing words, but the problem that the individuals actually can perceive it in totally different ways. That may think that it's something good, okay, or at least that it's acceptable, okay, not that so bad. But anyway, we're talking about the uncivil content that is just defined in an objective way to be consistent with the literature. So how to identify? So again, so we are talking about the Cantonese, okay, not English words. That is, there are a lot of dictionaries and methods that people use. Okay, so our methods to identify the uncivil words and the uncivil discourse on social media platforms, that we use what we call the word embedding enrichment method. So first we have some corpus, okay, for sure. That is, this is our data, how data come from. And then we train a word to vector embedding. So that is now the state art, not a state art, the word embedding model is the state of art, but the word to vector actually is the classical one. So we train this word embeddings, and then we input some seed words, which means that we just come up, okay, based on our experience, that what are they. So, and then we use the word embedding, we can find some top similar words, like for each word we just do the top 20 and whatever, okay, in that way. So we can just enrich the dictionary, and at each step that we're manually filtering the irrelevant words, and finally we get one. So you will see that actually just repeated this process that to around 10 steps, that you will get most of the very comprehensive list of that. So we compared, we also coded like you may think that the machine learning is the best, the state of art. We even use deep learning and train ask the students to code. Okay, not students, actually our RA and with a professor that encoded the content. As a training data set, and we train the machine, I think it's even for the deep machine learning models, like you use now commonly known the CNN, RN, whatever. So we tried, actually it's not as good as this simply Mexican method. We just using a dictionary to match. So this is some primary findings that you can see. That is, this is since 2011 that you will see. So it demonstrated our professor's impression on the campus, from the campus, that is true. That is the percentage of unstable comments that increased over the years, after even after 2014. Okay, this is a LIHKG that actually, I guess that maybe is a little bit of surprise. That is consistently high, but I don't think that it increased so much even during the social movement. But the Hong Kong discuss actually increased so much. Anyway, so I just 2 more minutes to talking about is that I just mentioned I want to test the incivility effects. So one of the effects that is we want to study that how likely the threads, the discussion contain that on several words that it will increase the engagement, like the number of replies or likes. Another is that whether the threads contain uncivil words that it will increase the percentage of uncivil replies under this in the thread. Okay, so this is somehow that is related to what we contiguous. So which means that the uncivil will lead to more uncivil. Okay, so in order to count, so for sure we have a lot of confounding variables that is first come from the users. Okay, so we cannot just list all the confounding variables from the user level, but the good thing is that we have so many data points, so that we can just use the fixed effect model. We consider to control at the user level, and for the context, like when, as I just mentioned, like according to attention competition, that is the timing that also influence the results. But even we control the user and the context, that usually we ignore one of the most important. And now I guess that this will becoming very popular in the next few years in computational social science. Then we need to control text when we are measure that. So uncivil, that we know which one is uncivil according to the dictionary, but that words will associated with other content, the text, like the words and whatever else. So this is a highly dimensional. So we can use machine learning, like recently developed using a double machine learning or double reverse learners, that to control for that literally control for text. Okay, and then measure that. I will just list you the results here. So as you can see, if I just run a simple OLS, the coefficient will be here. I use a fixed effect to control the user level confounding variables that will be here, controlling timing here, and controlling the topics that because we have a different subforums, we will consider it as a proxy for the topics, which is quite different from if we use a machine learning model to controlling for text. So if we control them, that you will find a non-effect. So it's nearly, is quite small and nearly insignificant at all. Okay, but for the percentage, which means the contiguous, that are more uncivil words that leads to more replies, that is the coefficients actually is more consistent. Okay, so that which means that incivility may not necessarily to increase the engagement, but it can increase more uncivil replies. Okay, so this is just for your information. I guess that I can stop here and to take your questions. And this is just for discussion in case you don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Hai, for a very insightful discussion of the series of the work that you conducted. So I think it generates lots of questions from the audience. So I will take the question. So first, Professor Tam, you want to speak about your two questions?
Oh yeah, thank you, Hai, for presenting at this webinar series. For the first time, something explicitly about network analysis. I know that network analysis is really core and center to the whole computational social science movement. Now I have two questions. The first question is something you did not mention at all. Let's jump right into your data analysis. As I understand it, the data is highly unstructured to begin with. To turn it into a network data per se is completely different than the good old days when we do social network analysis. Things are highly structured, very simple, very few data points. Now you have massive data points, a massive number of networks, and there are many steps. They are totally unstructured from case to case. How did you handle the computational aspect before this kind of pre-data processing? You didn't mention it. I think that is one of the entry barriers for many other non-technically oriented audience. Someone who want to get into CSS, one of the basic job they have to do is get the data ready. And now, what is the data, the dirty work you have done that, and how much of it is really specialized computational techniques that someone have to go through the training? That's question number one. Question number two, you have partly answered it toward the very end. When you talk about machine learning tools you use to define and codify various discussion contexts, how you define them as consistent or not, you have to make some judgment. You kind of refer to the techniques you use and behind your final conclusion. But you did not tell us actually, as a researcher, when you go through the process of and coming up with something you feel comfortable presenting, you have to do a lot of censoring, self-censoring as well. You drop various analysis and retain certain. How do you avoid the impression of your reviewer saying that you are fishing for the best result rather than something you can publish, you find is convincing, instead of having some sort of intersubjective criteria to say that, I've done this 100 analysis, and the overarching conclusion that someone else can make the same conclusion out of this 100 sensitivity test, that this is the way to go. That was totally skipped. And I thought that would be one of the core jobs and challenge for any computational analysis that involves machine learning, and especially in the context of making causal claims, not descriptive. The causal claims, what is affecting generating certain outcome or certain structure. That is a big claim. When we do that, there are a lot of potential traps. How do the state of the art scholarly now handles this kind of question? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that the connection not so good, and if I'm wrong, so just correct me. So I'm not sure that I catch your ideas clearly. But anyway, so for the data connection of the social networks, the first question is about that is the connection, and with also the preparation, the clean, the dirty work about the social network. So for sure. Okay, so I also mentioned this, that actually this, so first I want to take this opportunity to see what I put in the last slide. So actually this is a good advantage of computational social media data using to study the political conversation structures. So in the past, actually it's very why is the major conversation structure of in a very simple way that is simply we cannot get a large scale structural data, okay, unlike what we can get from the social media platforms. That it's relatively easy, but actually it's not there. as just Professor Tan just mentioned, it's relatively easy because it's it's there, but you need to get it and process it. For example, okay, for the discussion forum, when you connect the data, that is the reply to relationship, as I just mentioned, to construct the discussion network actually is not there. So you even need to use a text mining to detect, okay, to find, okay, the different users between the relationship. But it's a good thing that is like for the typical discussion forum. So if you reply to someone that in your comments that you will call out, you will definitely call out others other usernames. So you will just call into this feature and to extract that user, and then to reconstruct the network. So for for Twitter that will be even more complicated. Okay, for the following network, who follows whom, that you can just use the API to directly to get the following list. So for example, you give your ID, and it will get all your followers and also even the users you follow. But for the retweets, as I just mentioned, the sharing network, that is not so easy, not straightforward, because that you can still use API to get all the retweeters. So giving a tweet, then you can get a list of these users, okay? But you don't know who retweeted from whom, okay? So you need to, so my method here, that is a very rough, but actually other scholars also use the similar method, even publishing in Science. So that is that you need first you need to connect all the retweeters and check their timelines, and also get their friends, means that the users the followed, okay, and the friends all the timelines, what is the post, and check how likely. So if I retweeted something, and I will check all my users I followed and see, okay, how many people actually retweeted before me, and it's probably I retweeted from him. Okay, there is even a lot of algorithms about this. So it's somehow it's inferred, okay, not even that it's not the actual network, diffusion network. It could be wrong because it's estimated, okay. So there are a lot of work about this. So if the data is large, that will maybe spend your a month or several months. It's quite possible. Yeah. So I can tell you that when I conducted the first study I mentioned in the talk, that is in 2012. So at that time, that most of our PC are just within 4 GB memory. So I run a model that usually need to take 3 months for that kind of complicated network models. So you can imagine that. I tried that because recently I write a book chapter to replicate one of my study I just mentioned that. So I rerun the models right now that you can expect the results in several hours. That you can see that in the last 10 years how the technology that improved. So the second about the machine learning, okay, so if my understanding is correct, that is machine learning, if you like you run many models, and it finally, so there is a joke, you know, that on Twitter, that is currently I will see this repost again, that I see that what is machine learning to describe the experts of machine learning in the area, that is see that is what is machine learning, that is something you run a lot of models and report is the best one, and don't tell others that you run how many models. So and always you reported the one that with the results better than other models. Like the table I just show you, I show a lot of models. The final one is always mine, and the best one. So you will see this is somehow this is true, okay? So but here I I want to say that it's one of the best thing in computer science, and I mentioned this again and again, even for my students, that is one of the best major contribution from computer science to social science. That is the concept of cross validation. So I think that is a really good thing. Okay, so that is you always need to cross. So for example, I just mentioned like the double machine learning and double robust learner. Okay, there are two models that inherently the model that incorporate the double machine learning, no, the cross validations that we split the data into different folds. Okay, randomly divided in different sub data sets, and we just run the model on one, and we estimate evaluate the accuracy in another. So this somehow that can technically, okay, at least technically to avoid this kind of phishing strategy like p hacking. Okay, so that is nearly the norm. Okay, that we now currently. So if at least as a reviewer, so as a reviewer, if I read some articles without a cross validation, and I will just reject. So I think that is also a good practice for social science. So that is a huge implication that for us, for our regression generation, that is for social science, we always run the regression models, like, okay, we just run the regression model on the data set. So think about it as the same thing. Even we cannot so many parameters that we can manipulate, but you think about that, it's easily to get overfitting. For if you run your model on a single data set, I can increase the terms like your x square, cubic, and whatever. So it's easily I would get a R square with like 90%. It's not so hard. But the problem is that if you use cross validation, that will definitely you cannot do this, because that you even fit your data well when you use out of sample data, and you cannot get that the same fitness.
Thank you.
Okay.
You answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay. So next question is from Zhang Liang.
Hello.
Hello, Professor Liang. I'm sorry, I'm not going to turn on my video. I apologize for that because my background is a bit messy. So I'm just going to ask a quick question about data quality. Well, actually, it's a common question, common problem about social media data. Well, it's random for a person to decide to talk to another person because the behavior is not expensive and it involves little cost. So it seems to me it's a casual behavior. So I'd like to ask whether the randomness affect the validity of your findings, and because of the randomness, can your findings replicate on other social media platforms? So these are my questions.
Yeah. I totally understand. So that's a good question. Okay, I will answer in two ways. The first is the social media the political competitions on social media platforms. That I will not use use that word, but as I mentioned, I just use that word as informal. So it's informal, but this is on the one hand, this is our research interest. We're talking about informal political conversations, which would be very, very different from the more formal discussion, like in the native council. So even now in the native council, that is maybe not deliberative in today, right? So anyway, so where our research interest is, so first is about informal political discussion. You can see that it's not important, not influential, has zero consequences. It's pretty okay, but we want to know, okay? So that is a research target. The second about accuracy, you're talking about the replicability. So that's really a problem. So, but not just influenced by the randomness, it could be influenced by many others, like for the different platform that may totally means the different users. So like in Hong Kong, the AI Hong Kong G, that is quite different from the Hong Kong discourse. So the users even with totally different political leanings. So as I also just mentioned in the discussion forums, compared with Twitter and Facebook, they are different because they're organized in totally different ways, and one emphasis on the topics, another is emphasis on individual users. So it could be different, and the only way that we want to generalize our studies is that is to replicate the studies using different data. So that is again related to the cross validation. So it's very hard, okay, to claim that you find something universal.
Okay, so I mean, I'm sorry, just ask a follow-up question. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you said that your research topic was about informal discussions, and then because of the randomness, your patterns are unstable. So when you made conclusions, when writing your paper, so does it mean you said that my findings are limited to the platform? You just have to say that.
Yeah, sure. You must acknowledge that even you use a very large scale Twitter data, that you still have that limitation. So this is something. So for the social media data, or even broadly speaking, for computational social science, so there is no perfect data. And why we have a computational social science, that is to solve the problem, to solve some of the problems. And if you think that if you think that there is no perfect data and no study, and I can tell you there is no study, no more study.
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, I agreed with you that we don't have perfect data, but I think as researchers we should think about how to eliminate the negative impacts from the.
Yeah, you need to consider that.
Yes, I just want to know how you deal with that. Yeah,
you need to consider that. So about that, for example, I've spent a lot of, so like for the discussion forum study, I've spent you just imagine that 10 years ago. So the computational social science is even not a methodology that are well accepted, acknowledged by the whole field in the academic field. So you need to justify a lot of things. So you need to justify a lot of things, like the possible confounding variables and why it cannot be generalized, why your findings are different compared to other studies are different, and whatever. So you need to justify a lot of things. And usually in social science, that people may appreciate that your thoughts actually even you are self-criticize yourself in the study, in the paper.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your thank you for your answers.
Okay, so maybe I can ask a question. As a privilege of the chair of this talk. I personally learned a lot from your very rigorous studies that enhance an understanding of like very important topics of political discussion. But my question is more about like some solution side. So can you tell us about some real world implications of your studies? Particularly about some solution side about political polarization, network fragmentation, and like political instability. Of course, like real world implications are a bonus, not an imperative of a study for us like researchers. But it would be great if you can try to think about what we should do about all these issues, both online and offline discussions.
Yeah. So that is a very, very good question. I always that reflect, okay, on my own studies, what would be the more practical solution-oriented implications of our studies. So to be honest, okay, so till now, at least what I talk about today about a political discussion. So my conclusion actually is something I mentioned again and again. So like many other communication studies, that is not so that important actually. So if you think that a political communication is very important, so we need to encourage more healthy political communication in what way. So at least my observation and my study experience tell me that it's not so important. Okay, so even it's good, it's not so important. Even it's bad, it's not so worse. Okay, what really important is something I didn't study, but I guess in the next few years I want to study more in that aspect I just mentioned. So we put too much emphasis on the communication side or communication technology. So we think that is the communication technology that will improve society or damage the society, whatever. So maybe it's not true, but on the other side, the society will be more influential to influence the communication technology and how people that talk. So it would be better that it incorporated this side. Okay, even the at the government level. So even the public policies that different policies can change the way of people talking, and whether the talk is towards the good or bad. So I guess that is more important. Okay, but it's something I didn't explore. I haven't get a chance to do that.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so if there's no further question, so thanks again, Professor Liang, for insightful and very rigorous work that you present. And for the remaining CSA webinar, please tune in on the further announcement. So I hope everyone stays healthy as well as have a good afternoon. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.